To get this started, it's going to be a 2-day project. And it's mainly 1 day to allow the ice cream to reharden overnight after you mold it. And then for the cake to cool before you combine them. That's the major time factor in this. Because you don't want to put cold ice cream onto a hot cake and then stick it back in the oven, because the heat of the cake and so on will just melt your ice cream before the oven has any time to do its job. So we have to form the ice cream, then we will put it in the freezer and let it sit overnight so it's really good and hard. The next day then we do our cake and our meringue. All right, just so that you know ahead of time. It's not so much the actual physical time that you're using, it's the wait times that makes it so long. All right, you could bypass all of this, not do the cake, simply take the ice cream, plump it onto a pan, coat it with the meringue, and shove it in, but then it's not really a baked Alaska, is it? So, let's get started. We're always doing cooking, frying, and so on. Today I want to do a special dessert. And by special dessert, I mean something that you would want to make for special occasions. It takes very minimum prep and attention to detail. So what we're going to deal with is we've got ourselves now I get this is, these come in paper instead of plastic, so I can scrunch this down and use it in my burner, rinse it, set it up as fire starter after I dry it and so on. So I use it in my beehive when I'm smoking my bees. But we're using about 460 grams or 500 milliliters of ice cream. We've got one cake mix. In this case, I'm going to be using a lemon cake because the wife likes lemon, and it goes well with the butter pecan ice cream that I'm using. Then lastly, we're going to have a cake mold that I can open and close to get the cake out. And besides the bowl, the spatula, the mixer, thank you. That's basically it. And what we're going to be making today is called a baked Alaska, which is, in basic terms, we're going to take and bake ice cream in an oven and not get it to melt, or at least with very minimal melting. And the way that we do this is we're going to be using egg white and make a meringue. Again, cooking is nothing but science. Cooking is chemistry done in a particular fashion or way that is edible. What happens is the meringue, because of its composition, acts as an insulator for the ice cream. And by the time we're done, we're going to have a cake, ice cream covered in baked meringue, where the ice cream is still frozen. And like I said, you can do this like for Valentine's, an anniversary, a birthday, special things. And again, the amount of egg white that you use versus the amount of ice cream and so on, it's all based upon the size of the cake and so on that you want to make for this. I'm doing a very small one, so I'm using a pint. I'll be using about 6 egg whites, and vice versa. We'll get into that as I do it. So let's get going. All right, once the ice cream has softened, we want it softened, not melted. We want it like a real thick, like Play-Doh. We're going to form it into here, freeze it overnight. Then using hot water and a spatula or whatever, we're going to separate it from this. So now it's going to be the same size as our cake. And what you're going to wind up with is something that looks like this. All right, so let's get that done. The first thing we're going to do is we need to let this melt just enough to make it pliable so we can form it to the inside of this mold. All right, once our ice cream is rehardened, we've got some hot water. I've got a holder that's going to be a little bit larger than my pan size. What I'm going to do, we're simply going to dip this here and finish breaking it away. From the side. I mean, you could use a stiff spatula or whatever, but do not use, with me, I'm using a non-stick thing. You do not want to use metal in this, or you'll scrape that Teflon coating off. Once that's done, open. I've got my ice cream. Then I am going to put this on top. And using a paper towel, I'm simply going to warm the bottom. Until my ice cream separates from, yeah, see, that's actually still freezing to it. And this is going to go back in the freezer. Once this is cleaned, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to butter it. And this will help it from sticking. When I do my baking. Now I wash this with warm water so it's slightly warm, and that's why the butter is just melting onto it. So I can get that to go on there nice and smooth. Because the inside of this is round, I'm going to have to use my fingers to really get in there and get that all nice and battered. And there we go. You can put a little bit of flour in here, temper it so it's all lightly floured, which I will do in a minute. But I won't do that until I'm almost ready to put the cake mix in. So now that butter will sit there and sort of continue softening while I do the cake mix. So we've got our egg separator here to separate our yolk from our white. For that is this cake mix requires 3 large eggs, but we're removing the white. So I'm going to use my 6 yolks in with the egg mix and then use the whites for the meringue. That way I've used all my stuff and there's no waste left over. So let me get these separated and get back with you. So we have lightly floured the inside of our thing. We've simply made the mix according to the instructions on the box, but instead of using 3 whole eggs, we're using 6 egg yolks, and that's because we're using the whites for the other part. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill this about 1/3, 1/4 to 1/3 full. And that will depend on how thick you're going to want your cake underneath. Okay? Because remember, it's going to rise. The rest of our stuff we're going to put into a different cake form. Remember, with these silicone cake forms, always get them wet on the inside first, and that will keep it from sticking to it. And then once again, according to the instructions, we're going to put these into the oven and let them bake. And back in about 30 to 45 minutes. So my cake puffed up a little bit more than I wanted it to. So all I've done, and I've got a cake cutter, but this is so small I can do it by just using a bread knife. We're going to just remove that puffed up piece so that it's semi-flat. We're just going to put that to the side. Now we're going to separate our cake from this and flip it so we've got an actual flat side to work with, and let it cool. So our cake is cooled. Our ice cream is frozen, broken, and sitting on its plate in the freezer. I've pulled the egg whites out of the fridge where they've been sitting. You don't want to leave your egg whites out while you're doing everything because, I mean, it's eggs, okay? Not good. We're going to put 1/8 of a teaspoon, that is teaspoon, not tablespoon, of salt. And 1/2 of a teaspoon of sugar. The salt and the sugar will give a nice offset to the egg white. You can put a little more sugar if you want, but it'll give a nice offset to the egg white, and that salty sweet will blend with the butter pecan ice cream that I selected, and this in turn will offset the starker or stronger flavor of the lemon cake. Again, everything works together. Then we're simply going to whip this up and turn it into a meringue. What a lot of people do not realize is you can over whip your meringue. So what I like to do is, as I'm getting it fluffy, I will scoop that fluffy meringue off and separate it from the unwhipped egg, so I do not overbeat my meringue. And this way I keep a nice fluffy meringue, which I will whip up a little bit once all of this is done. But in this way I'm not overbeating my already whipped meringue and reducing it back to a airless husk of liquid. Now that I've got the majority of everything meringued and I don't have that liquid continuously throwing up, I can now put this back in and give it one last good whipping to really get that froth in. You can also put in like a cream of tartar or something to help thicken it, but I'm just not doing that for this. Again, you do not want to over whip it, but you want to whip it good. Okay? Now we put our cake cut side down, so we got a flat surface, into a pie sheet. This way, when I put the meringue, some of it's going to run down. We don't want it getting in our oven. So the oven I have preset for 175 Celsius. You got to check your own oven for this. Now we're going to put our ice cream. We're going to coat this, and it's going to go into the oven. Now at this point you want to really pile that meringue on. See there? Want a nice you really got to be good about getting those sides, because that's where it's going to run off the most initially. So that's where the majority of any of your melting is going to occur during the baking process. There we go. The rest of that egg white I'll beat back down to a liquid, and I can use it for cooking. Now with the oven, I only have the top burner of the oven going. I don't have the fan going. I don't have the bottom burners going, just the top, because that's all I want to cook. So now it's done. You'll notice though, if I try to get the sides totally brown, it's going to burn the top. What I like to do, you can just keep rotating, okay? But what I like to do is caramelize it. I'll take a little bit of sugar and throw it onto it. And mind you, this is cooked, see? It's cooked, but what I want to do is just get sort of an even appearance. And for those that have such a little device, what I like to do is just give it a little more color. Just to even it up. You gotta be careful, this stuff will burn really quick. There you go. This will now go into the freezer and set. And we'll let that set until dinner time, and then we take it out, you cut it, poof, baked Alaska. Enjoy. So this has been sitting in the freezer for about 3 hours. I like setting it and letting it set. Some people prefer to eat it directly out of the oven when it's still warm. It's up to you. I like it this way because it allows me to get a much more defined cut. Now there's a little bit of a trick to this. I want to take a metal butter knife and put it in hot boiling water and let it sit there and warm up for a minute. I've got my little pie scoop. And then what I'm going to do is with the hot knife, it'll slice right through that now refrozen ice cream. There we go. And voila, baked Alaska.